Hello everyone, Lars here, with yet another fight analysis, brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers, by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel, by novice writers, for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. This is kind of the big one that I've been building up to now for a while. I know I've said that with a few of these videos already, but seriously, this is the one. This is the fight that made me take a step back, sit down and think for a little bit, and realize as a writer, I really needed to take a closer look at how fights and battles are written, how they work within a story. Today's video will be an analysis of RWBY Volume 5's epic ending of Raven vs. Cinder. But first, I need to address some things. Some of you might have noticed that suddenly the video stopped for a while. Well, things got super busy on this side of the computer screen. With a new job on my end, editing a novel and trying to get another published, I have found myself with suddenly precious little time. And the same goes for many others in the harem. Really, all of us are kind of strapped for time at the moment. So we're trying to figure out how we can best continue on keeping videos consistent, but not eat up all of our free time. But yeah, this video will wrap up our summer surge of content. Don't worry, we're not going anywhere. We're just figuring stuff out. As a bit of an update, we just wrapped up all of our recordings for Season 1 for our podcast, and we are setting our sights on Season 2, and also do a couple of specials here on this channel. Let's just say that I'm really excited for the future. We've got some cool stuff coming up. Alright, enough preamble. On to the duel between Cinder, the Fall Maiden, and Raven, the Maiden of Spring. I need to acknowledge that this fight caused a big stir among many fans and critics after it aired. The reactions were really something more of akin to blowing up a cluster of the proverbial hornet's nest instead of to just kicking one. Most reviews I read and watched absolutely destroyed the duel between Raven and Cinder. However, I personally disagree with a lot of those sentiments out there. Now, this video is not a plea for anyone to radically change their opinion about Volume 5 or about the duel between the two maidens. What I intend to do is give honest reasons why this fight is objectively pretty good and how it failed in certain aspects and how it succeeded in others. From there, I'll give some writing advice for all of you aspiring authors out there, and maybe by some ridiculous miracle, maybe some of my suggestions about writing will make their way to Rooster Teeth. Yeah, probably won't happen. But, well, if I can help just one writer out there, whether they be a novice writer or an accredited one, or help give someone a better perspective on the ending of Volume 5, well, then really this video will have been worth it for me. Because this analysis does not come by way of any particular request, this is something that I just decided to do, and because there are a lot of opinions and insights out there, I've decided to compile 3 particular quotes on the matter. First, from our very own lovable rapscallion Nate, who had this to say: Cinder was foolish to have tried to take on Raven and Vernal. As far as Cinder knew, Raven was fully fledged and a well-respected huntress, and Vernal was a maiden who was more familiar with her powers than she. She was a fool to think that she could win against both, even with her trickery. Of course, the twist that Raven was the maiden the whole time only stacked the odds against her. Which, yeah, that's pretty honest, pretty good right there. And then from our own good friend and fellow novice writer and YouTuber, Zaza from the channel Zap, she had this to say: So something that stood out to me right away about the fight was even though Raven technically threw the first blow and made the first move, she didn't right away use her maiden abilities. She stuck at first to her normal fighting style and let Cinder be the one to escalate, while Raven simply matched her until she could see an opening to strike a fatal blow. You could see it in their banter, with her comment about her arm. This made Cinder feel weak, in the sense that Raven had discovered a weakness about her, and she instantly became more power conscious. She started using and relying more and more on her power to protect herself rather than focus on winning. She seemed to go into defense mode, and again by Raven even saying something like that out loud, this was showing her own internal planning. Banter and intimidation tactics like that before a fight are often not so much the opponent trying to strike the other out, Though that's normally what people use it for, it's actually a form of self-informing. Like talking to yourself, but with the advantage of getting into the other person's head. You've pointed out a weakness. Now you and your opponent are aware of it, and you can just continue going until that weakness can be exploited, and even their strengths turn against them. Cinder is very capable with her maiden abilities, and so Raven the whole time just kept working to match Cinder in terms of power until Cinder made a mistake, or Raven could create a mistake. She didn't know if Vernal was still alive or not, but she still gave the signal as a double fake-out, basically, well, what's behind you? And then punch her in the face. A simple, elegant move that didn't require giant swords or bursts of power, but that's what Cinder brought it to, so that's what Raven would match. Okay guys, seriously, I'm just already going to do this plug-in right here. Go check out Channel Zap, especially if you are a RWBY fan. She's got some amazing stuff out there for you guys. So I've got a link for her channel in the description. And finally, from our own fearless and exalted articulate leader, Camille, she had this to say about the fight. Cinder's a punk-ass bitch that never stood a chance against Raven. Oh, there you have it. Now, for the final time in this series of analyses, I approach looking at what writing fights are like and how you analyze them by considering two questions. Number one, what is the story that's being told? And number two, what is the purpose of this fight? To answer the first question, RWBY, originally created by the now sadly departed, deceased Monty Ohm, it is an epic coming-of-age story as young Ruby Rose and her friends fight to save the world from creatures called the Grimm and their sinister allies. RWBY is a protege huntress, someone who keeps humanity safe by finding and killing the Grimm, who in turn seek to destroy humanity. With her massive gun scythe, Crescent Rose, and magical dust to enhance her abilities, RWBY is ready for action. Helping her on her journey are her friends Blake and Weiss and her older sister Yang. Also along for the ride are John, Ren, and Nia, fellow hunters and huntresses. To oversimplify a pretty large plot, a primordial evil called Salem leads the Grimm in a faction of disillusioned hunters and murderers to collect 4 relics of amazing world-building and destroying power. She sends her faithful assassin Cinder with a group of hunters, gangsters, and terrorists to bring down Beacon Academy, where RWBY and her friends are training. Cinder succeeds in bringing down the Academy and killing the gang's close friend Pyrrha. However, RWBY's Deus Ex Machina Silver Eyes keeps Cinder from claiming her prize. Actually, I really don't know how to define RWBY's eyes, do we? I know I discussed this a little bit further in my video about how to avoid Deus Ex Machina, but still I'm kind of on the fence about it. I mean, it works as Deus Ex Machina, but it could also work as a literary trap card. Who really knows? In any case, the story quickly swings from happy silly days in school to a sinister plot spanning kingdoms, politics, races, and family. The young huntresses and hunters must venture out into the world to not only grow up, but to save their world and hopefully find answers to their friend's death. In answering the second question, what is the purpose of this fight, we have to consider 3 important plots within the overall story. First of all, but what may matter actually the least in this fight, is that this is all about Salem trying to get her hands on these mystic relics. This is supposed to build up to the overall plot of the story, but in a way it kind of takes the back seat, as we'll soon see. Secondly, focusing in on Cinder, she is once again the agent sent by Salem to retrieve this powerful relic. Cinder survived the encounter with RWBY at Beacon Academy, and now she is souped up with the powers of the Fall Maiden, giving her access to magic that few others in the world possess. And with a grim arm that allows her to steal others' magical abilities, she's now a pretty formidable foe. As Cinder was the one who killed our dear beloved Pyrrha, she is someone who, well, has to die. But in this scenario, she is even more powerful than before. There's a lot of emotion wrapped up in Cinder's arc, really, and a lot of other characters find themselves pinned to her fate. John not the least of all, as he wants to avenge the girl who loved him. Finally, we have Raven, who is Yang's mother, and I guess a kind of stepmom to RWBY? I don't know how to classify their relationship. Raven was once one of the star pupils of Beacon Academy, and Professor Ozpin gave her and her brother Crow some pretty awesome magic of their own to help him in his quest to protect the relics. She has the ability to change into a raven. But after she was charged with protecting the Spring Maiden, she and the Spring Maiden kind of disappeared. And Raven turned her back on the war against evil, guarding others, and she walked out on her family. She now leads a rogue band in the woods, a band of opportunistic cutthroats, really, and she keeps the Spring Maiden hidden within their midst. What makes this fight interesting is that the character arcs that are intertwined in this battle are those of two rather hated characters within the canon. Fans especially hate Cinder for killing our sweet cinnamon roll Pyrrha, thus sinking the only true good ship, Arcos, but they also really hate Raven for abandoning Yang and being an all-around unpleasant person. And yeah, straight up murdering another maiden and taking her role because she thought she wasn't strong enough, yeah, that's a really cold move, Raven. To sum up, the purpose of this fight is in part to bring a powerful relic finally into play within the larger plot, but more importantly, it is a moment to confirm who these two villains are. Cinder, the overconfident, condescending, murderous woman willing to go to any lengths to get what she wants. She's devious, conniving, charismatic, and adaptable. She's a force to be reckoned with. Cinder is the embodiment of the quest for power corrupting a person's soul, whereas on the other hand, Raven is the survivor who has constantly chosen the easier path and deludes herself that this is strength. She abandoned her charge, she left her family, and she's fleeing from the war under the guise of protecting her clan. She is a powerful fighter, she's smart and stubborn, but is that really strength? The way that the fight plays out has gotten a lot of flack, especially from YouTube reviewers. I think it's important to start with a comparison. If you line up this fight with the others that we got from Monty earlier in the series, such as the entrance exam battle against the Nevermore, or the hilarious cafeteria food fight, it has the same physics-defying awesomeness and anime speed to the movements of the combatants. Just this time, the feeling is very different as the stakes are much, much higher, the music is way darker, and it's villains that we see battling, not heroes versus villains. The thing is, if you don't like Raven vs. Cinder because of the action beats or the unbelievable chaos on screen, chances are you already don't like the show's brand of action. Otherwise, if that's already something that you're okay with, but you just don't like the feel of it, well, it's probably due then to the darker setup as opposed to the much more lighthearted stuff we've gotten in the past in the show RWBY. An important thing to keep in mind is that there are many, many varieties of action. RWBY purposefully plays around with anime battle tropes and mechanics to make over-the-top action sequences. Monty wanted his series to be one that was both big on heart and big on action. Because of the original production for the show being so low budget and there being so many time constraints and resource constraints, there was no time, like in other stories, to give a full rundown of the many kinds of dust, weapons, battle styles, and so forth. Monty only included what was absolutely necessary, and then used big action sets to draw in his audience. Bearing this in mind, RWBY really sets itself apart from other action stories. Yes, you can tear into it and brutalize the styles by comparing it to other series which are much more refined and defined with their fights, but purely for the sake of criticism, I think that it's a pathetic and pointless approach to compare RWBY to other kinds of series such as, let's say, Naruto or Fullmetal Alchemist or Mistborn and other high-octane tales of action. And this is because, well, they're just so very different. But if you do use comparison as a means of pointing out the merits of the different styles, well, then I will admit that that's pretty profitable. That all means that the fights in RWBY have to really be compared against each other. Luckily, and also unluckily, the series has undergone a transformation since Monty's passing. Many of the fights have lost their speed and focus, and now concentrate much more on slow motion displays and giving certain frames to show either what a character is feeling, a precise move, or a precise effect of dust. Oh boy, I'm really conflicted on this point. This change does help highlight some really great parts in the fights that were previously missed, especially getting to see the emotions of the different combatants. But at the same time, that makes many of the newer fights feel awkward and off balance, and just ultimately too slow to belong. And it just doesn't match the same spirit and energy of Monty's first 3 seasons. That means that Cinder vs. Raven is a welcome return to previous form. However, in hindsight, you realize that the energy and action are just really on par with the cafeteria battle. A duel between two maidens like Raven and Cinder should be way above that. This inconsistency has been a large detractor to volumes 4 and 5 in the show. As for the flow of the fight itself, I personally loved it. The posturing right before between the two characters, Cinder and Raven, both villains preparing their backstabbing, as we get to see how Raven really is the survivor with her helmet covering her eyes and using Vernal as a shield, and Cinder just being so confident with her secret weapon, with her grim arm and all that. It's really awesome to watch their careful barbs being traded back and forth, and then finally, once Cinder just freezes Raven and attacks Vernal, just all hell breaks loose. This is the first real magical fight that we get in the series. Both Cinder and Raven demolish the underground cavern where the vault is to the relic, with their magic just being released. Seeing the versatility with different weapons that they're able to have, and how they're just able to kind of create different weapons. They're able to navigate these massive explosions and jump around as rocks are falling. It's awesome to see, but then we also get to see their raw, unique skill with the blade, that they're both really good warriors, and just the crazy speed and the brutal way in which they engage one another, and how the music complements that, really sets an amazing tone for the fight and just keeps up that awesome fast pace. The one thing though is that this then makes the fight that's happening upstairs just seem really pathetic. And I do include Hazel in this statement that his own fight seems really pathetic because, yes, while the other characters are just fighting to subdue one another and he's actually fighting to kill, he does way more hulking out and Hulk screaming than he does Hulk smashing. And that's kind of sad. And as a quick side note, it's really pathetic to see that the quality of the battle within Haven Academy is just so bland. It doesn't measure up in any kind of way with the previous fights that we've seen in the series, and it doesn't measure up in any kind of way to the duel between the maidens happening underground. Intentionally dumbing down one fight to emphasize another is not a wise storytelling tactic. Anyway, in terms of improbable combat made fun, the duel between maidens at the end of Volume 5 reminds me largely of the battle at the end of Gurren Lagann. Sometimes a fight should not be about the beats and the fancy moves or anything like that. Sometimes the raw emotion and the over-the-top action makes for a better combination. It is a good mix for this particular clash between antagonists, and my writing challenge for Gurren Lagann stands here. I think that if you would spend some time trying to recreate this particular fight in the form of prose, you will find just how brilliantly choreographed it is, and how the speed and the ferocity really play into the personalities of the two combatants. When Raven finally tricks Cinder into exposing her back by placing the thought that Vernal is still her trump card to winning, she finally gets close enough to strike her down. Pyrrha's murderer is finally thrown into the abyss and frozen solid so she cannot save herself as she falls into darkness. Raven is then able to open up the vault holding the relic, but she relinquishes it to her own daughter, Yang. Because as we finally see, this strong survivor is weak where it really counts. In many ways, Raven walks away from the fight having lost Vernal a chance to reconcile with her daughter, and she steps away from yet another chance to be a strong hero that the world needs her to be, and what her family needs her to be. With Volume 6 not far away, we will soon see the long-reaching consequences of this battle. But for now, we are only left to speculate what happens to Cinder and her maiden powers, and what Yang and her friends will do with the relic, and if there is any redemption to be had for Raven. This final fight in Volume 5 is wonderfully ambiguous and gives the audience a lot to chew on and mull over. It is in many ways the most meaningful and intense fight in the entire series. But it is largely criticized for being in a very slow season, for not exceeding the bar of previous volume battles, and having such an open-ended resolution. I personally see this as evidence of the show growing up thematically and addressing the darkness and nuance Salem and Ozpin together talk about in the very first episode of RWBY. Now for some writing advice. When it comes to writing battles, consistency is key. I've said it before, and RWBY really proves my point. Once you've nailed down your specific style of how you write action, you build up on that. You shouldn't break form unless you're really trying to highlight something in particular, or if you're cranking it up to 11 and saying, hey, all of those other battles you thought in the past were really cool, well, see this pupper. Now, it's kind of a little bit difficult for the writers of RWBY to do that because if you honestly look at some of the opening fights in the series, it's already a little bit cranked up to 11. So once again, really know your writing style for action and work within that realm. And it's totally fine. From story to story, you can change your style of how you do action. But you have to think about what the story itself needs. And that brings me to my next bit of advice. Remember that it is okay to have over-the-top crazy battles and action sequences. It comes down to what fits your story the best. Harry Potter, for instance, doesn't need to have people moving around at lightning speed like we get in Naruto. And that's okay because duels with wands are awesome. Magical martial arts like what we see in Avatar: The Last Airbender are awesome, but they would be totally out of place in an RPG world of weapons and magic like RWBY. You use the battle writing that fits the spirit of your story. But just remember that still, using the wrong style of action within a story that just wouldn't fit, like having magic wands be in Pride and Prejudice, it just would totally hurt your story overall. I know that sounds totally stupid. You think, well, duh. But honestly, when you're writing out your story for the first time, it might be a little bit difficult to see that yourself. So workshop it out, get some advice from others, and spend some time mulling it over, and you'll get it right. And my last bit of advice from this video is this. Take risks with writing your battles. A fight between villains is a fascinating way to delve deeper into the motivations and personalities of your darker cast, and such battles add a level of uncertainty to the whole tale. You know when a villain and a hero battle, that if good prevails, things should turn out for the better, and they will get worse if the villain triumphs. But when two villains fight, the outcome could mean something entirely new for your story overall and for its cast members, and also for your audience. And so in general, play around with different battle scenarios. Do not limit yourself to just one specific tried and true formula. Try looking at some things that you haven't done before, what you think other people haven't done before, or haven't done enough of, and see how that might be able to fit into your action writing. I think you'll be able to come up with some really awesome things that way. Okay, that does it for this video. Please remember to check out the YouTube channel Zap, because it is seriously awesome. And go check out our own podcast episodes, if you haven't already, where we have more discussions and advice in regards to writing. We also have art on our Tumblr, discussions with us, the members of the Harem on Reddit, and motivational writing homework on Pinterest. Yeah, I know homework doesn't sound really great, but this stuff is seriously awesome. And all of that, I will have links to all of that down below, so you can check out all of Camille's Harem goodness. And please help us prepare for Season 2 by suggesting terrible fanfics for us to make fun of. You can send us those suggestions via Twitter at Camille's Harem. And thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a great time making it. And until next time, tschüss.